Hey everybody, Dustin DePirac here, columnist Andy Graham. We're out here at Ohio State with the Horseshoe, and this one wasn't quite as bad as what we've seen in recent weeks. Still a loss. Ohio State wins 34-20, but saw a little bit more fight in the Hoosiers today. Defense looked a little bit better. Still had some mess ups. But at the end of the day, I mean, they made it a game. It was 27-20. I think they had, they were driving before Trey Roberson throws a pick. It eventually turns into a touchdown on the other end, but still they made a game out of it. Did some things you haven't seen in a while. Andy, just what'd you think? What'd you see today?
Well, I think that they did, in fact, show up to play today and fight pretty much from wire to wire, and it was good to see. And I also think it was the kind of matchup that was conducive to Indiana playing competitively if they in fact came to play, which they did. It was more between the tackles. The defense wasn't spread out all the time, playing in space. Braxton Miller's ability to hurt them through the air was going to be limited. I liked how aggressive they were. I mean, it was feast or famine, boom or bust in regard to the blitzing.
Yeah, that's true.
They had 6 sacks today, but they also gave up a couple of touchdowns on quarterback draws. So it was, but at least, as Kevin Wilson said after the game, he said when you have, especially young guys on defense, I'd rather have them playing on their toes than on their heels, and I'd rather be coming after people. And then on the offensive side, I mean, once again, the offense moved the ball reasonably well most of the day. They weren't quite as successful running the ball today, which was another thing was predictable against Ohio State's defense. But Trey Roberson played, very well within himself. That last pick was a freshman throw. That was a case where he stared down the receiver and he threw late, and it caused an interception. But let's face it, I mean, Indiana was driving for potential game-tying touchdown to send the game into overtime, perhaps. Mitch Ewald, who's been very dependable all year, missed a field goal.
40-yarder, but that was a lot. Justin Pagan did not help matters there. He had back-to-back false starts
still
on the field goal, too.
It's a makeable kick, and it just didn't – it looked like it might have been even a hold situation or a snap situation because it just didn't come out of there cleanly. But whatever the reason, it just might have been a miskick by Mitch. But Indiana could have been driving to win the game at the end of the game. So they were in this from start to finish. They scored the first 10 points. They were opportunistic. The defense created a turnover. The offense cashed it in. Just a better performance by Indiana today than what we've seen in recent games.
Yeah, it's an interesting paradox with this team defensively right now. It's strange because they don't win the game at the line. Clearly, they're not ahead of the game in the trenches, but they're still better off playing a straight-up I formation, just come at your team. Yeah. Because I mean, it's almost like at the end of the day they're going to get up points one way or the other, but they're going to give up more if you run a lot of stuff that confuses the guys on the back end.
Well,
and
that's right. That's totally
causes
right.
for more. Yeah.
And Jeff Thomas came back today, middle linebacker, which I'm sure helped with the calls and cohesion a little bit. But this was a linebacker game. Indiana can play its big linebacking core with Jeff in the middle and Chase Hubler on the outside and Leon Beckham on the outside.
Right.
And they can't do that against Northwestern or some of the other teams that spread them out. And what did Chase end up with today? I was going to look at tackles.
Chase Hubler, without question, showed up today. We were kind of waiting for that because, I mean, he's definitely a guy, even from last year when he was a true freshman, we kept looking at him and saying, okay, Chase Hubler's going to be a guy someday and we were kind of waiting for it to happen, and this was kind of Chase Hubler's game. He had 2 sacks, 9 tackles, 3 tackles for loss.
Yep.
Really kind of showed up, really kind of looked like the guy that everyone was sort of waiting for him to be. And Jeff Thomas step up. I mean, they both, the linebackers had a pretty big game. Bunch of sacks, 6 sacks. So there was a lot they were able to do.
Yeah, and Alexander Webb led with 11 tackles, and he and Hubler had back-to-back hits on. I mean, Braxton Miller, the Ohio State freshman quarterback, is going to know he was in a ball game.
Right.
I mean, Hubler drilled him, and then for a sack of like -9 or whatever, and then on the very next play in the fourth quarter, Webb came in cleanly. And hit him right when he was throwing, and it was an incomplete pass, but it knocked the wind out of him and whatnot.
Right. No,
so that stuff was going on all day too. I mean, Ohio State would break big plays, but Indiana would come in and slobber knock them a couple of times too. So it was a ball game. It was you watched it, and it was a football game. It was a competitive game.
Right.
And Coach Wilson talked about it. It's not something he was going to play up through most of the week, but he looked at the film and said, the way they play. The fact that they're not especially proficient through the air right now.
Right. They don't do a lot of stuff that'll confuse you.
We actually could line up in our base and play them and maybe hang in there a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happened. I mean, I think Indiana came in thinking they could play with this team, and they did.
Yeah, no, they did. Offensively, I want to point out real quick, Kofi Hughes. I mean, they weren't able to run the ball extremely well, but, Kofi comes in, at the beginning of this week, or maybe as of last Saturday, Kofi Hughes is the, kind of third member of this wide receiving core. Maybe it wasn't the case stats-wise this year, but, DeMarlo Belcher comes back after leading the Big Ten in receiving last year. Deweese Wilson, everyone was kind of expecting a big year out of him, even though he was hurt. Going through a back problem most of this year. Two guys that had some experience, had been in the games a lot. Kofi, was kind of the fifth receiver last year. Saw some time. All of a sudden, Kofi Hughes is number one receiver on this team, and today was the first day that it was really kind of his core, and he played like it. 8 catches, 147 yards. But he did admit, came out, volunteered this information. We didn't even ask him for it. He just said that when Trey threw the fourth quarter interception, Kofi took that on him. He said, I ran the wrong route, just flipped it up in my head for some reason. I guess he just read the play wrong, or, I guess thought it was a different play than it actually was. One way or the other, he was not where he was supposed to be. He volunteered that information, just said, hey, it was my bad. It wasn't on Trey at all. I wasn't where I was supposed to be.
That's funny because Trey had a quote about Kofi in the sense. He said, Kofi's somebody I can really pretty much always depend on to be where he's supposed to be. He's a guy who
and for the most part today he was. For the most part, it was obvious that Trey was looking at Kofi. Kofi played like a top wide receiver today. Kofi played like a guy that, is calling for the ball, is asking for the ball, and, is making sure he's somewhere where the quarterback can find him.
He was hard to cover. I mean, he was hard to handle.
Yeah.
They were having trouble with him.
So kind of moving forward from this, I mean, after as bad as October was, what does this mean for this program going forward? Kevin Wilson's first year. How much can this make a difference, I guess?
It might. I mean, people just want to see a team that plays hard and it plays competitively. Wins and losses are kind of, obviously it would have been a monumental thing to win this game today, and they actually had a chance to do that. So I don't mean to play that down. Wins and losses still obviously matter, but people had become, I think, somewhat disheartened by the manner in which they were losing.
Right.
In October. This kind of game is a lot easier, I think, for Indiana fans to swallow because they came into the Horseshoe and kind of went toe to toe and had a chance and had a chance to win. And that's a heck of a lot better than giving up 600+ yards in Northwestern. I mean, it's just going to be more encouraging to people. And it's interesting. I mean, on paper, when you looked at this month coming in, you figure the way Ohio State, over here, and then Michigan State up there after the bye week, the way Michigan State have been playing defense this year, you're thinking, boy, Indiana might not really have a decent shot at beating anybody until maybe the bucket game. But even Purdue had been playing better as well. Now. And Purdue's given Wisconsin game so far today, but Minnesota really tested Michigan State today,
right?
And with Marquise Gray at quarterback, similar type of quarterback. So what the heck? Now they get a bye week. They have a chance to kind of reconstitute and really form up a game plan for Michigan State, and maybe they have a little bit better shot than people thought they did on paper coming into this month.
And I think I don't want to overplay this angle simply because there's a lot going on behind the curtain that we don't know about, and So you don't really know why some of these defections happen, some of those things. But I think what you're kind of seeing today is a little bit of, you're seeing solidarity between the guys that are still here. And I think that's some of what today represents. And again, I don't know, why some of these guys left, what's been going on with all the player personnel defections. You don't know if some of those guys were justified in leaving. But the guys that are still here, this kind of show that they're coming together, I think, to some degree.
I agree with that. And this kind of culture change, look, it's going to be messy. It's going to be ugly sometimes. It's going to be impolite. It's going to be profane. It's going to be unfair even at times, I'm sure. It's going to be really tough on the kids involved and on the coaches involved. These coaches are used to losing games.
No.
I mean, it is not easy on anybody, especially when you're trying to affect that kind of real culture shift. I mean, it's a shift of magnitude that we're talking about here, of some magnitude. And so it's going to be difficult behind the scenes, and we're not privy to what's happening behind the scenes, but there had to be some casualties, and there have to be some open wounds and some festering sores and all that kind of stuff. There has to be some carnage psychologically, emotionally, and in every other way. What we saw today,
I'm still not sure what that means. I'm still afraid I'm going to find out something that tells me that Kevin Wilson is really Bud Kilmer from Varsity Blues. I don't know when that's coming. I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but I'm still afraid of hearing that kind of story that there's something really bad going on behind the scenes there. But if there's not.
But today kind of belies that, though, because today looked like a football team that was coalescing, not coming apart.
Right. Yeah. No, that's kind of what you're seeing is the guys like Stephen Houston, guys like Kofi Hughes that have decided, you know what, we got to buy in.
Yep.
They're showing it.
Yep.
So that's kind of, I think, what you take from today. Again, they're not winning, but it's something. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.